Hello and welcome to this Tech Juice episode. I am Marshall Mohan. In this episode, we will discuss the Shadow Warrior's view on military equipment profiles with new technologies. In the previous two Tech Juice episodes, we discussed the trajectory of equipment profiles of armed forces if the conventionalist and the technophile had their way. Let's examine the mind of the Shadow Warrior, a third type of general officer of a different metal. Shadow warriors are generals who have risen from special forces and intelligence agencies. Just to give you a flavor of the way they think, have a look at the cover and contents of this book by General Sean McFate, who started his life as a paratrooper and officer of the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division, left the service, became a defense contractor, in other words, a mercenary company owner, and ended up as a professor of strategy at the National Defense University and Georgetown University School of Foreign Service after a PhD. General Stanley McChrystal, the JSOC commander in Iraq and of al-Zarqawi fame, has written a glowing tribute to this book. The book presents a sobering view of the nation state and the so-called international rules-based order. The actual status of the world's political map itself is very sobering. It is estimated that over 107 nations on the world map are nation states in name only and is actually run by warlords, narco syndicates, controlled dictatorship, ethnic religious groups, cyber criminal syndicates, and in some cases pure mercenaries who are part of the booming international business of private armies. Over the past 2 decades, we have seen extensive use of private armies. They come in various names and forms. For example, US defense contractors, Blackwater in Iraq, Wagner Group, sea mercenaries that provide support for passing cargo in troubled waters of the Gulf of Aden and Malacca, firms like Triple Canopy that specialize in protecting mining infra, Malhama Tactical, an Uzbekistan-based company that provides specialist combat services to jihadists, etc., etc. I think a very effective handling of Boko Haram by the mercenaries hired by the Nigerian government shows that mercenaries have become an accepted tool for handling things that regular armies are not trained to. Cyber mercenary companies are cropping up everywhere. If a government has a hack-back contract through these mercenaries that operate from lawless parts of the world, their networks are more likely to be spared. Opinion shaping through social media to meddle with elections, toppling governments, regime change, turning corporations against governments, and most importantly, people against governments in democracy has become an instrument of war. Such cyber capabilities are ignored only at the peril of a state. Another sobering statistic is that out of the top 100 economic entities of the world, only 29 are countries. 71 are corporations. To think that they will not have their own private armies, air forces, naval assets through so-called defense contractors to defend their global economic interests is naive. Types of wars since the Second World War have been changing. The chances of a conventional state-on-state war is likely to remain low, while the chances of what we call as other types of wars is likely to increase significantly. At least the data on wars of both these types plotted up to 2015 and what we are seeing in even so-called conventional state-on-state wars since corroborates this. The world will likely fester in a no war, no peace state of perpetual conflict. This will need flexibility, and nations that thrive in this uncertainty are the ones that will remain viable in an increasingly lawless world where the so-called rules-based international order will become less effective. I think conflicts arising from this chaos will not only be below the nuclear threshold, but may even be below the conventional threshold. However, not being prepared for both will result in trouble. Traditional war is shrinking in possibility, and other types of war have been on the rise. It would be interesting to see what corporate world thinks. Here is a graph of geopolitical risk on the left vertical axis and corporate attention to geopolitics on the horizontal axis from 2016 to 2024. Geopolitical risk is a GDP-weighted global average of political risk from GeoQuant. Corporate attention to geopolitics is the number of corporate event transcripts mentioning terms related to geopolitical risk, presented as a 3-month rolling average. While corporate concern for geopolitics peaked in 2022, corporations seem to have lowered their tensions on the matter, hopefully not because they have converted the geopolitical risk to corporate advantage. Shadow warriors point out that mercenaries may be the route of choice for deniable offensive actions on expensive capital assets. USS Fitzgerald collided with a commercial container vessel, ACX Crystal, off the coast of Japan, June 16, 2017. Unknown underwater objects have collided with a US nuclear submarine, aircraft carrier, etc. The Arleigh-Burke class destroyer is a workhorse warship of the US Navy, capable of operating independently or as part of a strike group. It can see everything below, on, and above the water surface, including objects in space, and it can kill anything that it sees. There is not a single 90-degree angle on the destroyer's superstructure, making it stealthy and hard to observe with radar. Propelled by a whopping 100,000 shaft power into 2 screws, the 500-foot ship can achieve speeds over 30 knots, slicing through the waves with its raked bow. And it can stop from that speed within its own length. It is one of the most powerful warships in the world, and the United States has 66 of them as of last count. Now, deploying these sort of high-tech destroyers and other capital assets in the Taiwan theater has only seen a strange type of brinkmanship from the Chinese Air Force. The Chinese fighter aircraft had done low passes over these ships with no weaponry on them. This brinkmanship was unique. A fire from the ship will start a war, and holding fire risks being hit. Similar situations are being faced by long-range bombers who regularly capture footage of Chinese unarmed fighters flying very close and harassing the bombers. US keeps rethinking its deterrence while China keeps occupying more abandoned islands in the South China Sea and then never vacates them. We should be prepared to see similar things in the Galwan and our border with this Himalayan neighbor. There are good points from all 3 types of future warriors. The threshold of conventional war has definitely increased manifold because of the loss of state monopoly over organized violence, or in other words, war. No war, no peace is likely to be the new normal, with warlike objectives achieved without firing a single shot. Example, Bangladesh. Non-state actors are no longer the gun-toting small group terrorists as governments would like to call them. They are corporate warriors, fully equipped with ships and aircraft and capable of war at a scale that may look like a conventional war with low-tech kit. National armies will be increasingly unfit to wage wars with non-state actors due to the saddle of the so-called self-imposed rules-based order and the wonderful coin phrase called winning hearts and minds, which has never worked. Non-state actors will breed the business for more non-state actors, and national militaries will need to learn to factor them into their war plans in the future. Famously, a mercenary was being blessed by a priest who said, "Peace be with you," in the usual manner. The irritated mercenary replied, "May arms abandon you," because the mercenary depends on no peace for his existence, and the pastor depends on arms for his existence. Let's examine the possible development trajectory of conventional capabilities with high-value capital assets such as fighters, attack helicopters, nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, and tanks. We should not look at their capabilities in isolation and build each one of them as the best platform that will survive a conventional war. Like in America, if I have a dwindling population, a very low appetite for physical risk, and wish to eliminate expensive training infrastructure for human pilots, combat cloud technology options such as swarm UCAVs or swarm underwater drones or robotized swarm tanks would be the direction to take. Conscript induction with low levels of training would be adequate to manage an armed force, and revenue cost load can be optimized. These technologies can further reduce our revenue load, and we can project much greater power with the same manpower. We have to constantly reimagine our inventory mix, which is evolving more rapidly than we can keep up with. I quote from the book The New Roles of War about the F-35. The F-35 fighter is awesome. It looks like a spaceship. It has 43,000 pounds of thrust, a top speed of Mach 1.6, and can perform instantaneous high G turns. One model of the F-35 can even take off and land vertically like a helicopter. But this fighter is no flyweight. It can drop 9 tons of smart bombs into a shoebox. Enemies will never know what hit them because the F-35 is invisible to radar. It is the stealthiest war machine ever made, able to see without being seen. Anyone taking on an F-35, said one pilot, would be like jumping into a boxing ring to fight an invisible Muhammad Ali. The F-35 also gives its pilot X-ray vision. The helmet visor allows the pilot to see through the aircraft, using remote sensors on the fuselage for next-generation dogfights. It may also be the smartest weapon ever made, running on 8 million lines of computer code, more than the space shuttle. When the F-35 flies, its silicon brain can see the entire battle space, automatically select targets for the pilot, and link to other friendlies such as tanks, destroyers, drones, missiles, launchers for cooperative targeting. The F-35 is a technological marvel, one that drives fighter pilots gaga with Top Gun lust. Even better, the plane practically flies itself. There are few gauges, buttons, or knobs in the cockpit. What you have in front of you is a big touchscreen display. It's an interface for an iPad generation, said one test pilot. Move over Maverick and Goose, F-35 is the future. Or, as another pilot said, it is a needed aircraft to get us where we need to be for the future of warfare. Should we too build a fighter like this? Of course, we should. Should it be paired with robotic fighter aircraft with the same or even better capabilities? Certainly. We must ensure that the robotic fighter swarms can collaborate with our 6th generation fighter and project the power of an entire fighter squadron in contested airspace, while the manned platform operates in a safer airspace. All existing fighter upgrade projects should also be manned-unmanned teaming projects to build an air force for the future. Unmanned fighters also give us deniability, which is essential in brinkmanship of the future. This argument can now be extended to nuclear submarines, surface ships, tanks, aircraft carriers. It can just be extended in the same way. We can draw some lessons from non-state actors who had overwhelmed the air defenses of Israel's Iron Dome with cheap rockets. The one thing that every aircraft or missile needs to avoid is birds. We can have cheap robotic or bionic explosive bird swarms with impact explosives on them around our airfields, aircraft carriers, and installations, which will act as obstructions to incoming aircraft and missiles. Similar explosive fish swarms will act as good defense when in formation with a submarine or an expensive marine asset. An AI-armed drone swarm can be used to attack an infantry unit without putting our soldiers in harm's way. These are not technologies of the future. They are already available. We probably just need to get ourselves out of our trenches, tanks, submarines, cockpits, and ships and think like our mercenary friends to build this kind of inventory. Investment in C4ISR and cyber needs to increase manifold. We must have the capability to manipulate populations, to rise against their leaders, achieve regime change, and also close the media campaign and uprising as well. A cyber game is the only thing that can drive usurped territories back to where they belong. I don't think saturation strikes and using 1,000 tanks to take over this territory would be effective in the long run. We need to learn to have deniability while dealing with non-state actors who fester wounds of established governments. Draining the swamp and elimination of entire communities is not something that national armed forces can do. Are these capabilities appropriate for national armed forces to do? I'm not sure. But if armed forces do not integrate cyber and C4ISR capabilities into their existing capabilities, including achieving warlike objectives for the country without firing a single shot, they would look increasingly irrelevant in national life. I must admit that a lot of technophiles are Americans. Americans are very good in packaging both technological means and new warfighting concepts like theater commands without thinking them through, as they did after the Gulf War. Americans are also famous for mixing up military technology revolutions to revolutions in military affairs. Militaries across the world cannot resist ideas and technologies emerging from the USA. That is why when America catches a cold, the rest of the world sneezes. When it comes to India, it must be careful to match our technologies and military warfighting concepts to the threats we face and their capabilities. China's fast advance in high-tech warfare should be propelling India to move fast on tech. Pakistan's reliance on shadow tactics should be propelling India to acquire counter-shadow capabilities to restore balance. So how do we prepare? What do we contract out? What do we invest in? We should robotize, automate most conventional capabilities, contractorize sub-conventional warfare, and focus our human resources on intelligence, cyber, and special forces for all the three services. I think the high-value conventional kill capabilities will be the reserve force of the future, while other forms of so-called sub-conventional warfare will become mainstream. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.